Hi, this is Tamara at mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to make the crafty hanging can cozy. You can find this pattern and all the information you need to make it on mooglyblog.com for free. It features Lion Brand Yarn's new Color Waves yarn, comes in a wide variety of colorways, and for this video I will be using my Furls G hook. Before we get started, I want to show you what it looks like when it's finished. This is a different skein. This is from a different skein than this one. Similar, but you can see there's slightly different colors here. And you can see it's got, this is a 16 to 14 ounce can, sort of if you buy a can of soup, vegetables, this is sort of your standard can size. And we're going to crochet the cozy that goes over it. To make it a little prettier, I've lined it with some pretty scrapbooking paper and covered any sharp edges with washi tape. You could use the washi decorative tape or some of those pretty colored duct tapes, whatever you like, just to help give it a little bit nicer look. So that's what I'm going to be demonstrating today. This is a great beginner pattern, so if you haven't followed written patterns before, please do go to mooglyblog.com and look at it and follow along the written pattern along with this video, and I think you'll learn a lot. So let me set that aside. I'm going to go ahead and get started on this skein. With balls like this, I always like to pull from the outside. I think if you pull from the inside, it tends to lead to tangles. So I'll pull off some yarn. You can see, get a look at how this yarn comes together here. It mimics the hand-painted yarns you get. So it's a really neat look. The colorways are pretty long. The colors, I should say the color stripes are pretty long, a little bit longer than your typical variegated, but also not quite self-striping, at least not with crochet. So let's come back to the beginning here. All right, I'm going to start with a magic circle. If you haven't worked a magic circle before, please do refer to the video for that. That's just the very beginning of this video, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But to begin, I am going to start with a chain 2. Oops, there we are. And then double crochet 12 times in the ring. That chain 2 will not count as a stitch. If you don't like the magic ring or you don't care for it, you can use whatever method you like to start working in a circle, whether that's a chain a few stitches and then join, or work into the first stitch after chaining a few. There's many different methods, so you can use whatever method is your personal favorite. So as I said, I'm going to double crochet 12 times into the ring or into the circle, however you began your pattern. You're just making a cozy here. It isn't a garment, so it doesn't have to be any one particular way as long as it fits the can. So just continue working in the ring here. And let's see, we've got, remember I don't count that first chain 2. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 9, 10, 11, and 12. And of course, these are double crochets because I use American terms. In UK terms, these would be treble crochets. So I've got my 12 double crochets in the ring. Since I'm using the magic circle, I'll just pull on my end and close that up. So I've got it nice and tight. I can tighten that up more later when I go to weave that end in. But for now, it's tight enough. I'm going to slip stitch in the first stitch I made. So going under both loops, I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch to finish round 1. There we are. If you need to pause and catch up, go ahead and do that now. All right, so moving on, I'm going to chain 2. Again, those won't count as a stitch. Oops. There we go, chain 2. And then I'm going to work 2 double crochets in each stitch around. So since we worked 12 in the first round, 2 in each, there should be 24 at the end of this one. Again, not counting that chain 2. We don't count it, we don't work into it, it just gives us the height that we need to make our double crochets. So I will work 2 double crochets in each of these stitches around, and I will see you when we get to the end of this round. Okay, so here we are at the end of round 2. I've got those last 2 to make. And I've got 24 double crochets in round 2. Again, you'll probably need to pause and catch up. I know I sped up theirs, but you don't need to watch me double crochet 24 times. So I'm going to go under both loops of the first one, the first double crochet of this round, slip stitch to finish it off, and then we're ready for round 3. Round 3 is one more round of double crochets, the last round of double crochets in this pattern, and it's going to begin again with a chain 2. And then we're going to work 1 double crochet in the first stitch. That's the same stitch we slip stitched to, just as before. And then 2 double crochets in the stitch after that. And that is our repeat. 1, then 2, 1, then 2. So we just made 2 in that one, so 1 in the next one, like so, and then, oops, 2 in the one after that. And repeat that all the way around so that at the end of round 3, you should have 36 double crochets. All right, and here we are at the end of round 3. Work those last 2 double crochets. There we are. And if you count, like I say, you should have 36 stitches in this round, or 12 repeats of 1, then 2, 1, then 2, 1, then 2, 12 times around. And that's round 3. So, just as before, we will slip stitch in that first stitch, like so. And then from here on out, we're going to switch to single crochets, although we'll do a couple different things with them. For this next round, we'll chain 1. Again, that chain 1 before a single crochet never counts as a stitch, certainly not in this case. And then in the first stitch, we'll work 2 single crochets. So we're still increasing on this round. It's the last round with increases in it. And then we'll work a single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So there's 1, and there's 2. If you're in the UK, those would be double crochets. In America, they're single crochets. So 2 and then 1, 1. That's our repeat all the way around. So the next one, we'll get 2 single crochets in it. 1, 2, worked in the same stitch. 1 in the next stitch, 1 in the stitch after that. And that's our repeat all the way around, so that at the end of round 4, there should be 48 single crochets total. So I'll see you at the end of this round. All right, and here we are at the end of round 4. So remember, it was 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1 all the way around for 48 total stitches. And to finish this one up, of course, I slip stitch right in that first single crochet, like so. And at this point, it's always a good idea to check your work, since everybody's gauge is a little different. The best way to check gauge for this is after round 4. I'm going to go ahead and pull this one off. You can see the inside of the cozy here. You can see it's just a regular, like I say, regular can. Oh, one note I did want to make. When I took the label off of this one, there was a row of sticky stuff, and I don't know about you, but I didn't want to stand there scrubbing it all day. A quick line of Scotch tape over the stickiness takes care of that. Done. It's all going to get covered up anyway, right? So, to check your work at this point, go ahead and turn it upside down and make sure that it's at least big enough to fit around the can. Okay, if it's way too big, then you'll want to maybe take this row off and just work up from row 3. You don't need row 4 if it's way too big. If it's way too small, add a little bit more. Just increase sort of in pattern a little bit until you get it just the right size. Now, because for the next rows, the most important thing isn't going to be so much how many stitches you have, but that you have an even number of stitches. So unless something went woefully awry, you should definitely have an even number of stitches, even if you take off a row or add another row. As long as you've got an even number of stitches, you'll be fine. So now it's time to start working evenly. We're done with our increases. So what we're going to do for row 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to chain 1, and now we're going to single crochet again, but in the back loop only of each stitch around. So each stitch will only get 1 stitch. So again, we'll just have 48 stitches, or however many you ended up with. And we're going to go in the back loop only. If you haven't done that before, it's pretty simple, although it's a little trickier on this first one because it's harder to see after the slip stitch. But what I'm going to do is, instead of going under both loops like I normally would, I'm going to stick my hook right in between those 2 loops and go under only the one that's in back. The back loop is always the one that's furthest away from you. So if I turned it this way, the other loop would be the back loop. But because we're always working from this side, right now, the one in back is the back loop. So I'm going to do that all the way around, just working a single crochet right under the back loop only of each stitch. This creates a nice little line, sort of a bit of a lip almost, a turn in our, not a turn like normally in a crochet pattern where turn means flip it over, but it causes the stitches to start moving in another direction. It sort of pushes them up away from the base along the sides. It just gives it a little bit more of a finished look in my opinion. If you hate working into the back loop only, it's not really important. Just go ahead and work under both. I happen to like the look that, and the added little bit of a, like I say, an edge or a crease almost that working in the back loop only gives, but it's not really important to making the pattern work. So again, if you hate it, skip it and go under both loops. That was hard to say. Go under both loops if you want to. So we'll continue working single crochets in the back loop only, or both if you prefer, all the way around, and I will see you at the end of this round. Alrighty, so I am crocheting in the last couple here. Now you have to be careful, you don't want to work in the back loop only of the slip stitch itself, because then you'll end up adding a stitch and we will end up with an odd number of stitches. So after I have worked in the back loop only of the last stitch of the previous row, then it's time to slip stitch, this time under both loops. All our slip stitches, I should say, have been under both loops. Oops, got a little bit of my hair in there. I know I'm not the only person that happens to. There we go. All right, so you can see this sort of back loop only thing starts to push it up a little bit and give it sort of a nice finished edge there for the bottom of the can. So from here on out for the next, oh gosh, let's see, that was row 6. So for the next whole bunch of rows, from now on through row 31, we're going to be working what's called the linen stitch. Sometimes it's called the moss stitch. It goes by several different names, but it's pretty darn simple. Don't get scared. It's just single crochets and chain ones. So I'm going to show you how to do the first row. We're going to chain one. We're going to single crochet right in that first stitch, like so. Standard single crochet. Then we chain one, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the stitch after that. And that's our repeat. Chain one, skip one, single crochet in the next. Chain one, skip one, single crochet in the next. And we'll continue that repeat all the way around until we get to the end, when we'll chain one and then join to the first single crochet of this round. So I will see you at the end of round 6. All right, and here we are. Time to chain one, skip the last one, and slip stitch in the first single crochet of the round. And that's our first round of the linen stitch, or in this case, it would be round 6. So for round 7 and all of the next rounds through round 31, what we're going to do is go, and this is where you want a nice bright light. I like to use an OT light or a really strong overhead light, and having a white background like this actually helps quite a bit too. But I want to find the chain space, not the chain one itself, but the space underneath. I'm going to slip stitch into the first one of those right there, like so. Then I chain one, then I single crochet right back in that same chain one space, like so. Then I'm going to chain one, skip the next stitch, go to the next chain one space, see it there, insert my hook there, and work a single crochet there. And that's how we get around round 7 and the next many rounds. Chain one, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the chain space, like so. Chain one, skip the next stitch, single crochet in the chain space, all the way around. And of course, when we get back to the beginning, we will chain one, skip what turned out to be the first stitch of the last round, and slip stitch into the first single crochet of this round. Luckily, these go pretty quickly. with 48 stitches or so, you're only making 24 single crochets. So once you've got the hang of it and you're used to going into that chain space, it can go pretty quickly. But it creates a really nice look with these stitches. Some say it looks a little bit like knitting, others say not so much, but it definitely works really nicely with this yarn. So I will work my way on around here. Probably getting awfully close. I remember we ended on orange, so we're coming up on it here. Yep. All right. So that was the last chain one space we had in the previous round. And then I chain one, skip over that first stitch in the previous round, and slip stitch into the first stitch of this round. And that's round 7. You can see the stitch pattern starting to come together here. Of course, this is on the bottom of the can, but you can see. And it looks a little messier when you're first starting out with this pattern. I noticed the striping isn't really apparent. The pattern will start to show up a little bit more the higher and higher you get. So for the next, what is it, probably 24 rounds or so, we're going to slip stitch in the first chain one space, chain one, single crochet in that one, and do the chain one, skip one, single crochet in the space all the way around, just like we did in the last round. Oops. Try and keep it on the hook though, huh? There we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside so you don't have to watch me do that over and over and over again. And I'm going to pull up one that I almost finished last night. Now, the pattern calls for it to go to 31 rows of that stitch over and over again. And that's what it'll look like when you get up to the top. If you look really closely, you can kind of feel where the slip stitches are because we're slip stitching in that first chain one space. This first stitch will move across as part of the diagonal pattern that you get with this yarn, or whatever yarn you're using. You're still going to get a diagonal seam, but it should be pretty well hidden by the stitch pattern. Again, using a multicolored yarn like that also helps to hide it quite a bit. As for the 31 rows, the most important thing is to get right up at this point. You want to get right up to the lip of your can. You don't want it to be too high or it'll pull. You don't want it to be too low or the can won't be covered. On the other hand, if you want to play with how much of the can you cover, you can certainly adjust that too. So when you put the cozy on the can, you don't want it to be so tight that it pulls the stitches apart, but you don't want it to be so loose that the can is loose around inside there. So when you get to about 31 rounds, you want to try it on the can and see how it fits the can you use, because while they're mostly the standard size, there can be a few different differences. So pull this one back out here. Here I am at the end of round 31. So I'm going to slip stitch right in that first one to finish it off. And then it's time for round 32, which is a little bit different and also the final round of our pattern. So to start round 32, what I'm going to do is create the loop. Now for my loop, the size loop I wanted, I have a chain 12. I'm going to chain 12 very tightly. I don't want this to be a loose chain. It's not going to get worked back into it all, so I don't have to worry about leaving it loose enough to get the hook back into. I want it to be a nice strong loop. Now if you wanted a slightly longer loop or a slightly shorter loop, you can definitely change the number of chains that you make here. If you don't want to loop at all, if you decide you'd rather have this on your desktop or countertop, you don't have to add the loop at all. You can skip this part. So again, the number itself doesn't really matter as long as it's long enough to do whatever you wanted to do. So we'll say that's 12, close enough for this one here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back to that first stitch that we slip stitched into, and I'm going to work another slip stitch there. And that will finish off our loop like so. So we've got a nice strong loop there. And then just to make this edge a little bit more finished off and strengthen the loop a little bit more, I'm going to slip stitch all the way around. I'm going to slip stitch in each chain space and each stitch. So I've already done one in the first one, so I'll go to the chain one space here, slip stitch, then right into the stitch and slip stitch all the way around. Then when I get to the end, I can use my needle, tapestry needle, yarn needle, to finish off weave in my ends, and go ahead and slip my can in. So, probably don't need to watch me slip stitch for 2 minutes. You get the idea. The slip stitching itself is a stronger edge than these stitches right here. These have quite a bit of stretch. A slip stitch has much less stretch. Although these aren't terribly stretchy, it is one of the firmer stitches. It does have a fair bit of vertical stretch, although not much horizontal stretch, which is why it's important to try it on your can a little bit as you go too. Make sure it's going to fit. You want a tight fit, like I said before, so it's not so loose that the can moves around inside the cozy, but obviously not so tight that it pulls the stitches apart and you can see the can itself. Unless that's the look you want to go for. Again, you could have fun with that. Use a color yarn that coordinates with your paper, and maybe you could paper the outside of the can and have it peek through on purpose. That'd be fun too. The great thing about this pattern is you can definitely adapt it to fit any project, any can, any need that you have. The only really important thing in terms of stitch count is to make sure you have an even number of stitches so that you can work this moss stitch around your project. So you get the idea. There's the slip stitch across the top, gives it a nice, really finished looking edge. You can see it again here in this one I made. When I got to the end, I just went ahead and sewed around that first part of the loop and secured it down, and then wove in my ends so that the loop is on there nice and strong. And then after you've put some pretty paper and a little bit of tape around the edge, and then I took another piece of tape and just taped the paper down a little bit right there. Then what I'm going to do, since I know when I hang the can, I will see this side, but not this side, I'm going to put the side with the tape in front. Let's see if I can get it on here. There we go. Just slide it right in, like so. Pull up. Because then when I hang it, which is kind of hard to do since I'm doing this flat against a table, but kind of pretend here, you can see when this hangs, then the side, the tape hiding on it there, whoops, that's a little more hidden. So just kind of adjust it till you feel like it looks good and it's ready to hang up. And you can put hooks in there, pens, pencils, whatever you like. And that is the Crafty Hanging Can Cozy. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I know it's a long one. I hope if you're a beginner, it's given you some courage to break out of scarves and blankets and flat things and try something different in a little 3D. And if you've liked this video, please do give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.